We all heard the news that Glock has supposedly stopped manufacturing all its handguns from the Gen 5 down. Okay. But before we get into this, because I'm going to discuss a few other different ways of looking at all of this other than what a lot of the other channels are posting. Okay. Please subscribe, hit the like button, leave a comment so the algorithms for my channel stay healthy. Alright, and thank you in advance. So, everyone's heard it, it's all over, everyone's making videos about it. And the thing is it official? Okay? And this comes on the other wacky, insane thing of where the California governor passed a law banning Glock pistols in that state, which that's insane in one way, and we'll discuss that later on when I get into the legal and kind of why all of this is happening. First of all, let's talk about the Glocks pistol itself historically. In the 80s, a guy named Gaston Glock, I think it's Gaston Glock, was a plastics engineer, come up with the idea to revolutionize how handguns are made. Any pistol, semi-automatic, and because they're all semi-automatics, he didn't make revolvers. The most complex and expensive part of the gun is the frame. Because when you make a frame out of either a solid block of metal, a casting or whatever, the amount of machining, the hours, and everything else it takes to make this part, the plastic frame or the frame of the handgun, is the most expensive part of the gun. So he came up with an idea where he used plastic or polymer, injection molded, and he made a very simple gun and revolutionized basically the way all handguns are made nowadays, okay? And what it was is the plastic part holds a metal chassis inside, I believe, and that's molded into the gun or dropped in and secured. There is metal in the frame, the trigger and the ejector, it's all metal. But the bulk of it, which you grasp and hold all the components and what the slide rides on, okay, is the metal parts in the plastic frame. Also, the Glock pistols were simplified. They're striker fired, which a striker fired gun has less parts than a hammer fired gun. So, less parts translate into lower cost and more reliability. Why? Because the less components you have in the gun, the less that goes wrong. The more complicated the mechanism is, the more things that can go wrong with it. So this guy hit on a winner. This was a huge innovation. I remember when they came out in the 80s, the late 80s, and our friend Chuck Schumer went berserk on the news saying that they made a gun out of plastic. And I remember before I even looked at one, I said it's impossible to make a gun out of plastic. There's no way you're firing a bullet out of a plastic barrel. So this hit the news, this caused a panic, everyone went crazy, and this is how this has become in the firearms world an icon. First of its kind, manufacturing, innovation, and everything else, okay? Got in the news. And if you take a person that does not know about firearms at all, never handled a gun, never fired a gun, and you say Glock, in their brain, this is what they see. Okay, it's that famous, okay, or that known. Now, what was the standard in getting into this? Our military did not adopt this pistol, but just about every law enforcement, a lot of these law enforcement departments did adopt this gun. Now, what did it replace historically? Well, you had the revolver, 38 or 357 Magnum, 6-shot, swing-out cylinder revolver. Okay, pretty simple to use. You push one lever on the side, you open the cylinder, you load it. Now it's loaded. There's no safety switch on a revolver. How it works, finger on the trigger, double action. Okay, the double action trigger pull is kind of the safety mechanism, and the whole concept behind it is you have to be extremely well trained and practice a lot to be able to accurately shoot this in double action. Okay. Also, revolvers are more expensive to manufacture. Okay. They all have metal frames just about. There are some polymer guns out there, but a vast majority of them have metal frames, and they cost more, they take more time to produce, and they're more expensive. Okay, so, and the reason revolvers were kind of replaced with law enforcement is because the criminals were better armed, had more firepower than a standard revolver. So they've gone by the wayside after like 100 years. So you come with the Glock, 17 round magazine, okay? Now, what's different about this than any other automatic pistol, I'm going to zoom in here, all right? Not just the manufacturing end of it, it's the simplicity of this gun, okay? You take the gun, load it, and now it's cocked and ready. Another innovation was the trigger and safety system. There is no manual safety. The only things you operate on a Glock, the magazine release, the slide release, and then to take down, you depress this while pulling the slide back about 1/8 of an inch, and the gun comes apart. Very simple, very easy. The whole concept is training your personnel to safely use the weapon. That was the key sales point of the Glock. It's a simple weapon to learn. You can take an inexperienced person and teach them how to use this gun safely and effectively in a much shorter period of time. Okay? And a lot of modern pistols are made identical. You know, other than say like the 1911, disassembling the 1911 is a little complex. It has a grip safety, which a lot of people don't like. It has a thumb safety, and it has a half cock safety. Okay? And it is a more complicated mechanism. Some people have issues with the grip safeties. And the other thing is, if you have the thumb safety up, a lot of people do not like having a manual thumb safety whatsoever. Okay? In a high pressure situation, it could be a liability. So, how does the Glock work? Well, that's got that little thing in the trigger here. There's a little finger in there. So how you would put the safety on a Glock is it's loaded, okay? It's ready to fire. Finger off the trigger, safety's on. Finger on the trigger, safety off. You want to put the safety on, get your finger off the trigger. Simple, like I said. And, you know, you release the mag with this button. You have the slide stop, release, and that's it. Simple sights, easy to disassemble and maintain and clean. Okay? So, a lot of police departments adopted this weapon. It is, like I said, going back to the revolver. Okay? Safety off, or safety off, safety on. Finger off the trigger, gun's on safe, finger on the trigger, the safety is off. It's a simple, same concept. That's why this replaced a lot of law enforcement agencies. This was the gun they went to. They make it in several different calibers and everything else. And simple, that's why everyone says it is reliable, because it is simple. Okay? Alright, so now we've established the gun. We've established that it's very popular with law enforcement. Now let's talk about the economics of that. For years, okay, Colt, Smith & Wesson, and Ruger were probably the top 3 revolvers carried by law enforcement agencies throughout this country. So a lot of handguns were sold. These contracts were lucrative. Probably a lot of these companies, the majority of their product was used by law enforcement. Same with Glock. Glock has things set up to where the law enforcement agencies do get a discount, and over the years a lot of departments carried some sort of Glock. Okay, I think the FBI even issued them in 40. Some police departments have them in 45 caliber, but the vast majority are 9mm handguns. Much like military surplus, you find law enforcement trading Glocks, okay, which go for about half the price of a brand new store-bought one. Okay, and it's another thing, I really can't mention prices here. Alright, so it's a well-recognized gun. It's respected in terms of quality, reliability, everything else. And like I said, it's easy to train people how to use this gun, and it has a lot more advantages over a revolver. Okay, so it's become like probably one of the most popular firearms in this country, or, you know, at least in the U.S. A lot of people love it. So, what's the big stink? Well, the fact that, you know, they have all these contracts, all right, and another thing is with the Glock switch. This is the big controversy. And this is kind of confusing because I heard a rumor they have, you know, the different generations, 5 and down, supposedly what they stopped manufacturing. There was a rumor they were going to make a Gen 6, which was going to be another breakthrough, totally fantastic gun, but nothing, you can't find any information. And now, because of the Glock switch, and we'll talk about that in a minute, they said that they're not manufacturing the Gen 5s down, except for a few models, and I'm not quite sure. There's so many models, I don't know what they are. And that's not official. That's something that kind of leaked out, and you know, the Glock itself didn't say that. And you have to remember, now we get into the political part of it. So they outlawed, you know, the governor outlaws Glocks. Now Glocks, probably the #1 customer is law enforcement, and local and state governments are the ones buying their product. I mean, a lot of it, okay? The political ramifications of outlawing them, which is ridiculous, and why it's ridiculous, are these guns have been in production since the 80s. You can go to a gun show or go online and find where they have a whole pile of police trade-ins at, like I said, half price. And so there are, I can safely say, an awful lot of Glocks out, you know, in the general public. So how can you outlaw something that's been sold for about 40 years, and there's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of them around? Okay? The whole idea of outlawing one type or brand of pistol is insane. Okay? Because this is now political, just like Smith & Wesson back during the Clinton era did, you know, that's another story, but same thing. People who were loyal fans of Smith & Wesson when it was owned by foreigners, and they changed the whole company, just about drove it into bankruptcy. Okay? So they've outlawed it, and then we come in with the Glock switch. Now, it doesn't matter what firearm it is, a Glock, AR-15, and I'm going to show you several other pistols here, and this is where I'm going to give you a warning about backdoor gun control, okay? Glock switch. What it is a device. You pull this plate off, and you can either attach something that's got a button on it, or I believe I've seen pictures of a more simplified thing, which is much like a lightning link or something, where you just shove this thing in there or replace this plate or something, and the gun's full auto. There's no switch. And probably it looks just like this. It's hidden, and you cannot visibly tell by looking at the gun with the other device that kind of hangs out the back end here, which you go, okay, yeah, that's got one in there. But the only thing is, it would probably just run like a drop-in auto sear in an AR-15. Put it in there and it just runs full auto. Those devices, just possession. You don't need a gun, you don't need ammo. Just having the devices, drop-in auto sear and the Glock switch, are illegal. You will get arrested, you will go to jail, okay? So when the police are saying, well, we got a problem, we can't do nothing, whatever, again, it's confusing what you hear on the news. And another thing about these guns is over the years they make magazines for these. Now, 17 rounds, you know, to carry this as a normal gun is alright, but they make 32 round, they make 50 round drums that fit in here. Probably weigh, when it's loaded, twice as much as the pistol weighs, but they make them. Okay, combined with the switch, now you got a problem. This is famous with gangs, gangsters, and all these other people running around, and it's a big problem in a lot of the cities where you have these issues with crime. Okay, I guess there are lawsuits being leveled against Glock because they said that the design is so easy to be converted that it's their fault that this is being done. Well, going back to, like I said, about Glocks, okay? That is a recognized brand, and, you know, they make that switch. You could buy them in China. Don't do that anymore, because I found out that how they caught some of these people is if you order that from China or overseas and they send it to you, they intercept it, and they'll follow the package to your house, and if you sign for it and pick it up, they're going to bust you. And you can find both Glock switches and lightning links for sale online. I don't know if it's a setup, I don't know what it is. Do not buy these things if you don't want to get arrested. So you have this issue, and again, you can 3D print these devices, and this is another thing that freaks people out is, you know, you're making them out of some sort of material. I know 3D printing has changed over the years, and the technology, you can make fairly well rigid usable parts out of it. You know, back when the Glock came out in the 80s, there was no 3D printing, okay? You had to own, you had to go to a giant factory where they had injection molds. I don't know if any of you have ever seen an injection mold for something like this. The things are gigantic, extremely expensive. So this was not something you could make in your garage when this first came out. Things have changed. You can make A, these illegal parts, and B, you know, the whole gun itself, more or less, okay? The frame and everything. I've seen where they 3D printed AR lowers and gun frames, okay? So, I don't know. Where the danger of the backdoor gun control, this state outlawed Glock pistols. There are Glock clones, much like this PSA dagger, okay? This particular firearm, they boast, you can buy the different size frames. It takes any Glock slide, accessory, or part is supposedly supposed to fit in this gun. So you can buy the frame and just buy a Glock slide and place it on this, any type of slide you want. You know, you get all the different type of configurations. So this gun, a PSA dagger, probably could accept a switch of some sort, okay? I don't know if it will or could, but if it takes all Glock parts, maybe so. This is not a Glock. Are they going to add this to the list of guns outlawed? Okay, then you have Glock clones. The Turkish make a whole assortment of guns. This is the PSA is the one, US one, and also Bear Creek Arsenal makes the Grizzly is a Glock style gun. You know, other than changing the grip angle or something, it is basically a clone of the Glock. Now, when it comes to the foreign guns, this here, AHSS, American Tactical. This gun is made in Turkey, but if you look at this gun, the striker fired mechanism is not a Glock style. It's very similar to, or it's a variation of what Walter uses. Okay, that's where you got the little indicator. And there's several different type of guns with that type of striker fire system. Now, we have the SAR-9, which if you look at this and compare it to the back, it basically has a Glock slide, and it is basically a Glock slide on there with the same mechanism. Now, will a switch work in this weapon? Now, when you say SAR, most people don't know what the hell you're talking about. You know, what's an SAR? They know what a Glock is, okay? But again, is it something, and to make a device that converts something into full auto, like a drop-in auto sear or the switch, they have one for the AR that you can make from a wire coat hanger. Okay, you don't need a 3D printer. All you got to do is a pair of pliers, you know, a pair of snips, pliers, and just bend it and do it. Okay, you know, it'll get you thrown in a federal prison, but it's not that difficult of a thing to do. It's just wedge something into the mechanism. Okay, is what's going on. And we have another one here that I noticed. I went through all my off-the-wall guns. This is Stoeger. This is really a nice gun, but if you look at this Stoeger and you look at the takedown and everything, okay, granted on this firearm the magazine is different, and I believe this one, I think it's made in Turkey. Yep, made in Turkey. Basically, it's a clone of a little Glock pistol. No manual safety, slide release, okay, mag release, same identical takedown system, and same somewhat identical trigger. Safety off, safety on. Okay, striker fired, and the back plate and everything looks very similar to a Glock. So, if they say because, and the reason why, okay, we're banning the Glocks. If the political reason why they are banning the Glocks is because it is extremely simple to convert with a device, and that is the reason why they're being banned, then they can also ban the Stoger, the PSA Dagger, and the SAR style handguns. There may be different versions, but if it has the same striker fired system similar to the Glock, okay, then all of these guns can be banned specifically by name for that reason, okay. And that's probably Glock clones. That's a large amount of firearms out there on the market. So where will this madness end? I don't know. And another thing about this whole debacle with Glock, like I said, there was rumors of a Gen 6, and now supposedly leaked out, Glock will start manufacturing something called the V model. You know, not to be confused with V as the Roman numeral for 5, but the V, and supposedly, and again, it's rumor. A lot of people say it would be redesigned to where you can't just simply place a device into this to modify the rate of fire on it, which would mean a total redesign of the striker fired mechanism. And a lot of the rumors about the Gen 6, it was supposed to be totally redesigned, because actually, other than for a few features from the Gens, it's mostly the grip and the frame, and that I believe that, you know, the triggers and all the internal components are very, very similar. I don't know if they were modified in any way, shape, or form from one gen to the next, but I think some things were modified, some of the later generations. But there was a rumor, started a year ago, and this has been years in the making, okay, for them to totally redesign the gun. They don't do that in a few months. This is years and years, market study, and that. Glock was going to redesign with the Gen 6 the pistol, and it'd be new innovation, okay. So that may be what's going on, okay, because it is illegal for anyone to take you to court, the manufacturer of these guns, and say, hey, you know, you were liable for somebody being injured, or, you know, even worse, okay, because of your firearm, your marketing, your design, and you're trying to use a thing because this is so easy to modify that you're liable because of your engineering flaws to make it. But that's nonsense, because if you think hard enough or study hard enough or do a number of things which are not that complicated, you can just about make any semi-automatic gun, you know, by damaging it or something, you know, increase its rate of fire. Alright, so that's my thoughts on it. So I guess we'll see what happens, but the reason I'm kind of making this, and my point is, I got 3 out of 4 firearms here that can fall under the same category, because even though they're not manufactured by Glock, the mechanism is identical to Glock, because the patent on Gen 3 has run out. So you can make something just like a Gen 3 that'll work on a, you know, that functions the same and is designed the same without hitting a patent infringement. Alright? Okay. Thank you, and stay tuned.